I want you to really embody the mindset of becoming the CEO of your own career, of being intentional with your career. And one of the best ways that you can do that is by focusing on your professional presence.
Welcome to the Ideas on Stage podcast, your regular insight into leadership communication.
Lorraine, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile before we got
Mhm,
started, and I saw a post, and I have it here in front of me, that you
mhm,
published 2 days ago. And you said that you spent the first 5 years of your career thinking that you were being polite, while in
mm,
reality, you're saying that you were undermining your worth. And then you
mhm,
listed some typical phrases that people say, like things like, sorry, can I just ask? Or I might be wrong, but, or this is probably a dumb question. And then you've listed a few others as well. And you said in that post that those phrases and many others make you sound junior. So tell me more about this. Why is that the case? And also, what do credible leaders do instead?
hmm This is a common trap that a lot of people fall into, even when you're more senior, because often we don't realize that we're using minimizing language, like the examples that you just shared. And so, for those listening, if you don't know what minimizing language is, it's language that weakens your message, that makes you seem less confident, and as a result, it makes you seem like a less competent, credible person. Now, I did use a lot of those early in my career because I was someone who just me being more junior, I was like, oh, I don't know if I have if I like earned the right to speak up or to kind of like make a statement or a recommendation. But that's what people look for in a leader. And so I wish I had not used as many of those phrases starting off, but it's very natural to kind of hedge your language, but it really does impact people's perception of you, and it slowly chips away at your confidence as well. Because if you're always saying, "Oh, sorry, sorry to bother you," and apologizing for things when you've done nothing wrong and you're simply doing your job, that sort of manifests internally as well. So, uh, getting rid of those phrases, and they're very common again. They find ways to sneak in, was a huge game changer for me and my perception and just also my internal confidence.
It's interesting what you said, that often when I was looking at your post, the immediate thought is that, of course, those phrases manifest externally in terms of confidence, but then they also manifest internally as well. And now you are the author of a great book, Unforgettable Presence, and you talk about in your book you talk about this idea of developing a strong professional presence. Now, often when I hear the word presence, it's often associated with, like, the typical phrase is executive presence. And
Yes.
this might be connected, maybe it's the same thing, maybe it's not the same thing. You often talk about professional presence. So let's start with a bit of a definition. What do you mean by professional presence?
Yeah, so you've nailed it on the head, Andrea. So I am reframing it or rephrasing presence to really be more holistic. So, to your point, professional presence, I define it as how and where you are seen. So, these are two very important elements of presence that are not often thought about together. When we hear presence, like you said, we often think about executive presence. And oh, it's a high stakes moment. I'm in front of the leadership team. I'm of a certain level. Typically, it's like a boardroom, in person setting. But what I've come to realize throughout my own career and talking to so many people is that presence is something that can and should be worked on throughout our entire career. So it's not like we hit a level and we're like, oh, to get to the next level, I need more executive presence. But it's, wow, we have presence at every touch point. And in fact, it's not really the big major moments that are the most important. Of course, they're important, but day to day, we're interacting with everyone in much smaller ways. So a Slack message, an email, passing each other in the hallway. There's a chance there to show presence. And especially when the world went virtual, right? where you're showing up, where you are seen is important. So we have a video and virtual presence. We have a LinkedIn presence, right? You went to my LinkedIn to learn something about me before we had even met. So you're making judgments and assumptions and learning about me virtually. And so I really wanted presence to feel like something that was something that all of us can learn. It's a skill. And hopefully that we all feel empowered that we can really strengthen our presence through all those moments in a day.
You just said we today we live in a often we live in a virtual world,
Mhm.
and because of that, today what happens is that our virtual presence often introduces us before we do. So, is there anything that you think that people do, including, as you said, even experienced business leaders, that undermine maybe something about their credibility, their authority in a virtual environment?
The biggest area of opportunity I see is with LinkedIn. And this is because a lot of people these days, before your website, you meet someone at a networking event, you meet a friend out and about, right? You want to learn about this person, you're going to go to their LinkedIn if you want to learn about their professional self. And there's this stat that I share in the book that is very powerful. That's by the Rain Group. And they said that 82% of buyers will look up a seller, someone trying to sell them something, on LinkedIn before replying to prospecting efforts. Now, of course, we're not all salespeople per se, but I think this really illustrates how important your LinkedIn presence is. People are going to your page to understand who you are you credible? I talked to someone once and she said, "Oh, I met the CEO in person and he was so impressive." And I went to go add him on LinkedIn and it was very sparse. There was like no profile picture, there was barely information. It looks spammy, and now there's this disconnect. Oh, was he that impressive? Like these two things aren't aligning. So LinkedIn, I feel like, is such an untapped space because, as you said, it's the place where people can really form that impression of you. And maybe they never even meet you and they form that impression of you, right? I've had people, I meet them on video and they're already just excited because they see my LinkedIn presence. And that's just such a powerful thing to prime people to think in that positive way about you.
And you said that we are not all salespeople per se, but it is true. Like for example, I know that you have in your book you have a quote, a praise from Daniel Pink. We had Daniel on the podcast, and Daniel says that whether we like it or not, in his book To Sell is Human, he says that we are all in sales. We don't have to
Yes,
be selling a product or a service. Sometimes we
yes.
need to sell ourselves.
Self, yeah.
We need to sell an idea, a vision, and staying on LinkedIn, in your book, you go
Mhm,
through some either mistakes that people make on
mhm,
LinkedIn. The you talk about the right way versus the wrong way
mhm,
of showing up on
mhm.
LinkedIn. Can you give me some practical things for our listeners to consider when it comes to using LinkedIn effectively?
Sure. So I'll start off with the one of the most basic ones, and that's your headline. A lot of people don't realize that what you put in your headline influences discoverability both on LinkedIn and through Google. So if you are looking for a new job, as so many of us are right now, saying job title at company is okay, and a lot of people include that, and you should talk about where you are, but also where do you want to be? What are the keywords that recruiters are searching for? What are other people searching for, to find someone like you? So saying something like, data scientist at company is great, but let's say you're trying to do a career transition and maybe you're trying to get into product. You definitely want the word product in your headline as well because people are going to be searching for that when they're looking for a product person. So the headline gives you 220 characters. They increased it up from, I think it was a 140 at some point. And so you really want to take advantage of all that space because, again, presence can be as simple as a LinkedIn headline, a touch point. When someone goes to your LinkedIn, you want to give them as much information as you can about yourself, give them as much background, and just get them excited again to know you and understand what you're about. So the headline, I would say, is one of the lowest hanging fruit.
And Lauren, before we continue, let's do a quick test, but it's not a test for you, it's a test for me. So as you were saying this, I just opened up
Yeah.
my LinkedIn
Okay. Yeah, I want
profile.
to hear.
Please let me know what you, but please be honest. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
we're
Okay.
doing this live. I'm not going to cut it. Whatever you say, I want your honest assessment. Now,
Okay.
I'll give you some background just in case you're not familiar with it. I'm the
Yes.
head of a company called Ideas on Stage UK.
Okay.
We are a public speaking, presentation skills, coaching, and training company.
Okay.
My headline is Author, Speaker, Presentation Coach, helping business owners, leaders, and teams become more confident presenters so they can inspire their audiences, increase their influence, and make a bigger impact.
It's great. Not just saying that because you're here. So I think, the first okay, so the you have some great keywords at the beginning, right? Speaker, author, what was the presentation coach, right? So great keywords. People looking for those, types of people you're going to pop up in search. And then you did something at the end, which also a lot of people don't do, but I think is very valuable, is you included a mission statement. So, what makes you different? Like, why would I go with you versus someone else who also has presentation coach in their headline? And so, I love being able to learn about the mission of what you do. So, I think that was excellent to include as well. I'm trying to think if there might be other things you could include. There could be like a credibility piece where you've trained like X number of people that you could possibly include in there. Maybe depending on like ratings you get or feedback, if that applies to your company, that could be something great as well. Maybe you train people to be on like TEDx stages. That could be something that you add as well. So I think you have a little more space potentially, but I think what you have is excellent. One other thing to consider that I've noticed as well, like if you have something for people to download or you want people to grab a copy of your book, putting a CTA at the beginning could be interesting as well. So I do that right now. Grab your copy of Unforgettable Presence because sometimes if people are not going to your page, but you're commenting, people see like the beginning of your headline, so it could encourage them to take that action.
Thank you. Thank you. After every episode, I always watch the entire recording and I will pay a lot of attention to this particular segment because I will go back to the headline and make
Excellent.
those improvements. And what do you think, based on your research, your work? You said at the beginning that you've talked to lots of people on these ideas around developing a strong professional presence. Is there a belief that you think that many people hold, or at least that some people hold, that you found to be completely wrong?
I'd say the main thing is around that concept of executive presence being presence and that you have to look a certain way, have a certain personality, be a certain way. I am an introvert, so anyone who follows me on LinkedIn will see that I talk about that a lot. And I like to think I have presence, and I've been able to develop my presence. And there's this phrase I when I sign books, I say, I'm excited for you to create your unforgettable presence. And I say that specifically because we're each going to have our own way of showing up. So it's not so much about fitting a mold anymore or sort of a stereotype, but how can we really lean into what makes us uniquely us, and have that shine through. So I think that's a new way of thinking of presence. And if you look at some of the data in terms of what people expect when they think of maybe executive presence more specifically, it is more authenticity and it is having more of those like people centric skills, human soft skills versus like being loud, being in the business suit.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that you are an introvert. Like today, at the time of recording,
Yes.
I posted something on LinkedIn where I also said that now I'm a presentation coach. I give
Mhm.
presentations all the time. I
Yep.
love being on stage. And that stage could mean, yes, a presentation, a keynote, but it could also be like things
Sure.
like this.
Yeah.
But I'm also an introvert. And I
Um,
don't want to take me as an example. I don't want to say that I'm a good speaker. I leave that to others, like for
yep.
others to choose, to decide. But the point is that you don't also in our space and we are very much connected in what we
Yes.
do. You don't have to be an extrovert to be a
Mm-mm.
great speaker, for example, and
Yes.
the same applies to having a strong presence. Now, when you see someone who has that presence that you describe in the book, Are there any particular behaviors that you see from them?
One I would say from a leadership perspective is lifting up others. And, I talk a lot about self advocacy in the book and talking about your work, which is very uncomfortable for a lot of people. And again, on the thread of introverts, like especially uncomfortable for introverts, but very important in order to stand out and to be noticed. And so, again, more research published in Harvard Business Review that shows when you use more collaborative language, like we, us, our, we did this as a team, we accomplished this, I'm so thrilled that, the team was able to move this forward. You're actually seen as more of a leader versus people who are constantly using I statements are actually seen as more junior. So for those who are looking to elevate their presence, to be seen as more of a leader, that's a really wonderful way to do that. I would also say public speaking, getting out there, volunteering to speak at the all hands, to speak at the team meeting. I know it can be very nerve-wracking, but it's a skill that has completely transformed my career. And I think it's such an essential, and I'm sure you would agree, Andrea, such an essential one to continue growing and again to be elevated in people's eyes because it is a scary, hard thing to do, and not everyone's going to do it.
You just mentioned public speaking you see as an essential skill, and I was very pleased to see at the beginning of your book you go through some essential skills in today's
Yes,
world. And
yes,
I have them here. Becoming a confident communicator, that's one. Supercharging your virtual presentations, so very much connected to online presenting,
yes,
which makes
yes.
sense today, and also leading meetings that are actually good. Now, the
Yeah.
first two, you touched on them already, public speaking, the importance of it. And of course, in today's world, it makes sense to also to especially supercharge your virtual presentations. Tell me more about this skill of leading meetings that are actually good. That tells me that most meetings are not good.
Exactly. So yeah, most meetings are really, really bad. And we had a meeting problem before COVID. It got exacerbated during COVID because virtual meetings are so much easier to schedule and go back to back. And they're still bad, even though some of us have gone back into the office. And I love talking about meetings. I know it's not the sexiest topic, but I love talking about meetings because it's such an easy fix. And because the expectation is so low, if you can just a little bit, a little bit above the status quo, a little bit better, have that agenda, be thoughtful, have the questions you want answered, figure out, what the goal is of the meeting before going into it. Wow, it's going to make such a difference. And people, again, are going to be impressed by you. They happen so often, right? We have so many meetings. So it's really a wonderful opportunity, a wonderful channel through which to really showcase your presence and showcase your leadership skills. So, again, really low hanging fruit. Not a lot of people are thinking about how to lead a good meeting. So if you're the one to do it, people are going to be so appreciative, right? They're going to know anytime you lead a meeting, it's going to be worth their time. It's not going to be something that they're dreading.
A low-hanging fruit. And also, as you said, because the way we work, the way we collaborate inside organizations is very much dependent on this thing which is called a meeting, then
Yep.
we spend so much time running
Hmm.
meetings, leading meetings, attending meetings, that I can see makes sort of sense to learn the skill of leading meetings that are actually
Exactly.
good. And going back to what we said earlier about online environments, virtual environments, and presentations, videos, in the virtual space, are there any presence killers, if you want, that we should be aware of, things that that we should be careful with?
Hmm. There's a lot of presence killers, especially when it comes to video presence. You have a great setup right now, but I'm so surprised, like still jumping onto calls where people have just clearly given zero attention to how they're showing up on camera. So similar to your LinkedIn presence, influencing how people perceive you. A lot of us, video is not going away. A lot of us meet our coworkers for the first time on video or meet an interviewer for the first time on video. And so if we're not thoughtful about how we're showing up, that does influence that first impression that someone has of you. I was interviewing candidates a few months ago for my company, and you know subconsciously, or for me consciously, because I'm just so aware of this, but how people showed up on camera made a difference. If you were in a dark room, if the angle was weird, if the sound was, in and out, like it's harder for me to hear you, to engage with you, and I make I make assumptions about your credibility and competence, right? So curating your whole video environment, the background, the foreground. There's lots of cool technology that allows you to put things on the screen with you. Being thoughtful about the eye contact, your hand gestures, your energy, you asked me when I logged on, do you have an external microphone? Things like that. Like they do really impact your presence. And again, like if you know you're showing up well, that is confidence, that builds confidence. I knew once I got the new camera and all this, I was like, wow, I look so much better. I feel great about how I'm showing up. On the flip side, if I don't have my usual setup, I'm like, I don't feel so good, right? So it does make a difference.
Again, it's not just external, but it also has an internal
Yes.
impact. Before we continue with this episode, I just want to share a few resources that I think will be super useful for you. The first one is check out either my book, Confident Presenter, or my colleague Phil Wakenall's book, Business Presentation Revolution, or both. These are books for business owners and leaders who want to take their presentation skills to a higher level. To make the most of the books, take the Confident Presenter Scorecard, which is an online tool that allows you to assess your presentation skills for free in less than 3 minutes. And then also, at the moment, I'm running a series of free presentation skills web classes, and I'd love to see you there. The links are in the show notes. Now, let's go back to the episode. And by the way, I also love your background. I was looking at it. I'll tell you also why I like it very much,
Please, yeah.
because of course you can see that you thought about it, but at the same time, it's still real. It's authentic. It's not too much.
Not
It's
over the
not over the
top, yeah.
top. Yeah, I like it very much. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And now, another thing I liked about your book, and you mentioned it already, is this idea that when we think about developing a strong professional presence, we often think about us. How can I develop that
Hmm.
presence? But you have a chapter
Hmm.
before you talked about lifting others up. So how can leaders help their teams become more visible,
Hmm.
which is great. And from from that perspective, now, do you think, or connected to this, do you think that there's a gap sometimes between how leaders show up in front of, it could be their team, it could be their clients, their colleagues, their
Hmm.
partners, a gap between how they think they show up and how they actually show up?
There certainly can be. Yeah. So, one concept I talk about earlier in the book is this concept of a career brand. And it's essentially a different way to think about personal brand. Because I know personal brand, people are like, oh, kind of slimy, like I don't have a personal brand. But the thing is, personal brand, career brand is essentially a reputation. So we all have a brand. So it can, be something that you're intentional about, that you shape and form, or something that you leave to chance. So the example that you're sharing is something that in a slightly different way impacted me when I was at LinkedIn. I was someone who was really hardworking, worked on high visibility projects, well liked, all these things that, I thought were helpful to get me to that promotion, to that senior leadership level. But there was that disconnect where, oh, I actually had to be more strategic and vision and be seen as more strategic, visionary, cross-functional collaborator, etc. So there was a disconnect. So what you're saying, about the leader thinking they show up one way but are actually perceived another way, it's very important to always be getting continuous feedback, not just leaving it for the one-time annual review. I know annual reviews are happening right now, but make sure that there isn't a gap, right? Ask more pointed, specific questions. I'm always talking about, there's a chapter or a section on feedback and how to get really specific with it so that you're getting information that actually helps you, again, move closer towards your goal or make sure that there's not that disconnect because that will be such a career killer, right? Not knowing that that exists.
Again, thinking about a career, developing a career, there are a couple of very interesting chapters in your book. One is you go through some ideas around how to make yourself unforgettable to executives. can we touch on the idea? If it would be great, for example, if you
Yeah.
could, if you've got some like someone in mind, or if you could give me an
Yeah.
example of someone who did that effectively. But in general, whether you have an example or not, how can we make ourselves, how can a business professional make themselves unforgettable to executives?
Let me think if I interviewed someone. I'll share one example. My friend Carlo, he's interviewed in the book. He's an executive at Cisco, and he is someone who has really worked his way up. I think he's been there like 20 years or something, like a very long time. And so that's hard, right? To go from that junior level to like a C-suite, right, person. And I think he did a number of things that were really powerful that I would love your audience to internalize and think about for their own careers. So the first is he was really intentional about finding sponsors. A lot of us, we have plenty of mentors, especially women are over mentored, right? And a mentor, it's important to understand the difference. So a mentor is someone who is going to coach you, share their own experiences, maybe ask you some questions, right? But they're kind of there as like a sounding board, someone to share their background and what they did. A sponsor is someone who is going to open doors for you and who is going to say your name when you're not in the room. So it takes a while, right? It's not like, oh, I find someone I admire and I'm just gonna like have them be my sponsor, right? It takes a lot of hard work, good work, because they're essentially, putting their reputation and their name on the line to bring you up behind them or with them. So I think he was really intentional about finding the sponsor and developing that relationship over time. Another thing that he did that was very powerful during promotion time is he applied for a promotion and he got runner up twice, second in line, which is crazy, right? So he's clearly like very qualified. He's like getting there. But what ended up happening is he was so focused on I guess like the constructive criticism that was in his annual review. But what he did instead of, the third time around, instead of focusing on like, oh, how can I fix that? He really leaned into his strengths. And again, he figured out strategically who are the people who are involved in the decision making, who's like connected to sort of like the decision maker, and let me get their buy-in and let me talk to them and figure out who those people are. And then that ended up, he ended up getting the promotion, but he was being very strategic in these really critical points of his career, and also, understanding uh, the goals of the leader, right? I think is also really, really critical, because then you're being as helpful as possible. And, whether it's fair or not, like managers will promote people who make their lives easier. So understanding that is key.
And these are some of the things that someone like Carlo may want to try and do to grow their career. Also, I'm thinking about
Mhm.
long term.
Yes.
If instead we think about very short term, say for example, there's someone,
Yeah.
again, a business professional, a business leader wants to, let's talk about like not necessarily a senior person, but it could be a junior person or maybe
Well,
mid-level
yeah.
management, and they want to grow quickly, very
Yes.
quickly inside an organization. Would you recommend something in terms of uh, some specific things that they could do in the first, it could be the first 30 days, the first 60 days, the first 90 days, you choose the time frame, the first X
Sure.
days or in
Yes.
their new role?
Yes, definitely there's things you can do. So the first thing I would do is figure out who to talk to. Who are you going to be working closely with? Who are your cross-functional stakeholders? And then find out what's important to them and what their goals are. Because then anything you do after that, you can be as helpful as possible, right? And you can be focused on the right things. So I think understanding your teammates' goals also helps you when it comes time like you need a favor for something or you need to like position something in a certain way. Like that can be really helpful, and also just makes you better known in the organization, right? And to be able to connect the dots in the future, the more people that you talk to. The second thing I would do is as you're getting, let's say like you're maybe 60, 90 days in, start again with the meetings, like your one-on-one meetings. Those are another really strategic moment. So I actually made a LinkedIn post about this today on the day that we're recording this podcast. So many people use their one-on-ones as like a laundry list or a grocery list. And this is something I did as well. Oh, I did this week and da 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 da, and you feel all good and productive. But your manager, again, if you want to be showing that you're strategic, it's not about what you did. That can be a list, and your manager can read that separately. But oh, here are the challenges I'm facing, the roadblocks, the ideas I have, the career conversation I want to have. You can break it up into different meetings, right? But being thoughtful about how you're showing up in your one on one, I think, is like one of the best short term things that you can do to really impress.
Is it possible that it was in your book, Lorraine, that I
Yeah.
read? It was an interesting concept. I think it was in your book. I read it a few
Sure,
months
sure. Yeah,
ago,
yeah,
and it was this idea of, because it's connected to what you've just said.
yeah.
Instead of in one-to-one conversations with your managers, for example, instead of just telling them the things that you
Yeah.
did,
Yes.
tell them the decisions that you made and how you arrived at those decisions. Is it possible that I
It
read
could
that?
have been. I mean, that's something I talk
Yeah.
about. Yeah. Yeah. Anytime you can show your logic. So so okay, so there's like kind of like a few phases. So one is like asking, what should I do? That's like the most junior. Then you might say, you know, I'm suggesting this, which is like the next level, which is great. You're bringing something that your manager can give you the yes or no to. You're reducing their mental load. The third option would be, I'm recommending this. This is my logic and reasoning behind it. And so, yeah, to your point, like that's the best option because you're really showing your thinking. Um, and again, your manager might have that. You're trying to predict like what your manager is going to ask about. So it's like if you say I have this decision, they might ask like, oh well, why not this, or like what's the trade off of this? But if you go to option three, you're kind of answering all those questions and sort of predicting what their concerns might be.
Your book, there's another interesting chapter, which is how to manage your manager.
Yes.
And in addition to what we said,
Hmm.
if the answer is no, no problem at all. But is there
Yeah.
anything else that's worth mentioning when it comes to managing your manager?
The one other thing that I would think about is understanding your manager's communication style. And so I talk about this concept of a README in the book, also known as a personal operating manual. And that's such a powerful resource to talk about pretty much whatever you want, but it's like how you work and operate, right? So as a manager, I always make sure I have my README. It talks about, you know, it gets as nuanced as when I send you a Slack message, like I would like an emoji reaction to know that you saw it versus just like leaving it there until, you get to it. It can be broader, like, I prefer to give feedback in this way, or, like, here are my typical working hours, and this is like the best time to reach me, or in emergencies, reach me like this. So I think as a manager, it's really helpful to create a document like that so that your team isn't worried about those kind of like smaller ways to interact with you. And everyone just works together better, right? When they understand that. But let's say your manager doesn't have that. Asking, okay, do you prefer in the weeds? Do you prefer high level? Do you prefer Slack? Do you prefer we jump on a call? While they seem like small things, again, you're kind of catering to your manager, making their lives easier. And that's always a really powerful thing to understand how people prefer to communicate because conversations and outcomes will just be much more productive that way.
I love that because you said it's a small thing, yes, but sometimes the small things can make a massive difference. Very simple, it's a very simple thing to do and implement,
Yes.
but it can lead to great results. I love it. And Lorraine, in addition to your book, which we're going to include in the notes, and I recommend it, Unforgettable Presence. If you think about the ideas that we discussed today, are there any other books that you would recommend?
Oh, many. Well, you said you had Dan Pink on as a guest. I was so happy to have him interviewed in the book, and so all his content is amazing. Um, let's see. Managing Up by my friend Melody Wilding is a great book. I'm taking a look over my shoulder here at the bookshelf. Think Think Faster, Talk Smarter by my mentor Matt Abraham's great book. So you know
We
I've
had
read
met
it.
on the podcast.
Excellent. Matt and I are catching up in a few weeks. Books by Vanessa Van Edwards. I've always learned a lot from her. Yeah, so those are a few, but I mean, gosh, there's so many great ones out there, and I'm lucky to be amongst them now with my own book. I'm excited.
Amazing. And thinking about your book, now that the book is out,
Yes.
if you could go back, sometimes with books you've got second edition, third edition.
Yeah.
If you could go back and if you could change, like, if you could go back, would you change something? Would you add something now that the book is out?
What a great question. I've thought about this a little bit. No one's asked me this yet. I I wish I would have been able to. I mean, I don't know if this actually would have even been possible just because it's, you're limited to a certain number of pages. I interviewed nearly 3 dozen people for this book, and I was able to include insights from each of them, but I wish I could have included even more just because they were all so helpful. They're all so smart. You know, it's like C-suite executives, best-selling authors, keynote speakers, just people, content creators, just across the spectrum. So that was something that I really love doing, and I would have loved to include even more of their insights. But I'm very happy with how the book turned out. So we'll see about, I don't know, future editions. I saw my publisher a few weeks ago, and they were asking me, and I'm like, let's see how this first book goes in year one.
Did you say that you interviewed 3,000 people?
No,
Did I...
3 dozen.
Ah, okay, right, because 3,000, wow, that's a
That's
lot
like
of
that's no, three
that's a
dozen.
lot of interviews. Okay, cool. And Lorraine, for our listeners, if they want to say hi, connect with you, learn more about what you do, where do they find you?
Yeah, so of course, definitely on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram, Lorraine K Lee for both. I have a new learning experience coming out next year, which is actually connected to the book Unforgettable Presence. So, following me on LinkedIn or subscribing to my newsletter is going to be the best way to stay updated on that.
Perfect. And we're going to include everything in the show
Yes,
notes. And
wonderful.
have I missed something? Again, if you think about the ideas in your book, the ideas that you care about, is there a question that you were hoping I would ask and I haven't and I missed it? Have I missed anything?
We covered a lot. I mean, I think this was very comprehensive. You went through I think every chapter. It was great. Thank you for doing such great preparation.
Okay, perfect. So let's close with this. If you think about again everything we've discussed, if you think about your book, your work, your research, what's the most important thing? Let's say, for example, that someone watches or listens to this conversation and after a while they forget most of it. It's not your
Yeah,
fault, it's just because that's how
sure.
things work.
Yep,
But
yep.
let's say that they remember one thing, just one thing. And if they remember that thing, then you will be happy. Well,
Okay.
what's that thing?
The one thing would be that I want you to really embody the mindset of becoming the CEO of your own career, of being intentional with your career. And one of the best ways that you can do that is by focusing on your professional presence.
Well, you said thank you for my preparation. I also want to thank you for your preparation because also this line that you just said, it tells me that, that you are prepared. So that was very good. Thank you. Thank you very much, Lorraine. Great to meet you, and thank you for your time, for sharing your ideas, your insights. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Ideas on Stage podcast, there are many more you might like, so please subscribe, leave us a review, and tell us what you think. You can find many more ideas on business communication at ideasonstage.com or by searching for Ideas on Stage on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and goodbye for now.